So for homemade Pop-Tarts, we need 2 pie crusts, milk, powdered sugar, strawberry preserves, and sprinkles. The very first thing that we should do is go ahead and take out our pie crust, and I recommend rolling this out on some sort of cutting board because the next step is going to involve cutting out the shapes for the Pop-Tarts. So the next thing we have to do is cut out the rectangles, and these are going to serve as the bases and the tops for our Pop-Tarts. And so this recipe makes about 5 or 6 Pop-Tarts depending on the size that you want to do. So I think I ended up doing about 6. So just keep this in mind when you're making them because you're going to need both a top and bottom piece. So after you've cut out a few, you're probably going to have to ball up your dough and roll it out again. I did not have a rolling pin with me, so we made do and just used a cup to go ahead and roll this out again so I could get another piece for the Pop-Tart. So the next thing you're going to have to do is add the preserves into the middle of one of your rectangles. And so the recipe called for 2 tablespoons for each Pop-Tart, but this ended up being a lot of preserves, and so that just wasn't really what I wanted, so I ended up changing that a little bit. The next thing you're going to do is just dip your finger in some water and then put this around the edges of your base Pop-Tart. Next thing you're going to do is add the top of your Pop-Tart, and then you're going to get a fork and just press it around the edges of the Pop-Tart to seal it, and make sure you press really hard because I had a problem with jam spilling out, and so you don't want this to happen when they're in the oven, so just press down really hard and make sure it's actually sealed. Now you just need to put them in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes and then go ahead and put them on a pan and put them in the oven for 14 to 17 minutes on 375. So now we get to make the icing, and so basically you're just going to, in a bowl, combine 1 cup of powdered sugar, and then you're going to add 1 to 2 teaspoons of milk. I added 1 at first, which is what the recipe called for, but it didn't really seem to be the right consistency. It seemed a little bit too gummy, and so I would recommend going ahead and doing the 1 and then seeing what the consistency is like, and then adding another one if you need that. So this is kind of the consistency that I found to taste the best, and so this, you don't want it to be too thick or powdery, but you also don't want it to be too runny. So once you get the right consistency, you're going to get one of your Pop-Tarts off the pan, and then you're just going to spread this icing around the Pop-Tart and make it as thick or as thin as you want. So the final step here is just to add the sprinkles. I didn't want too many sprinkles, I'm just not really into sprinkles, but I think it's fun to add them. It makes it more colorful and makes it look more like a real Pop-Tart. So here's our finished product, and as you can see, they are not the prettiest Pop-Tarts. We had some problems with the jam spilling out, like I mentioned before, but overall they taste pretty good, and I would give it about a 6 out of 10. They don't taste exactly like Pop-Tarts, they taste more like a pie, but they were still good, and I still enjoyed making them, so I do recommend this recipe, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.